All right, Mark chapter 10. Mark chapter 10. Again, feel free, if you still need to get coffee or food, you're more than welcome to do that. I'll understand you don't care about your marriage at all, so that's not a problem. All right, Mark chapter 10. It would be good if we could actually back up in verse 2, but I'm going to read just the main verse right now. It really gets the point across, and that's going to be verse 9. This is not really a popular verse today, that's for sure. This was in response to a question from the Pharisees about divorce. And this was his conclusion as Christ was going through all the different, going through the question pretty thoroughly there. But in verse 9, he said, "What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." All right, let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, I pray that you bless this time. I pray that you be glorified and magnified. I pray, Lord, that you give the wisdom that is needed, the help. And again, fill me with your Spirit. Control what I say and how I say it. Lord, I love you. I pray this in Christ's name. Amen. So again, what I'm trying to do is, again, build a foundation up that the marriage can be enjoyed and not simply endured. First session dealt with the theology of marriage. Getting the right principles down and understanding it. Then following up with love, what biblical love looks like, because you're not going to have any enjoyment in the marriage without it. This is also another key here, is commitment in the marriage. When there's a lack of commitment in the marriage, or the threat is always present of it ending, that marriage is not going to have joy. It's not. That marriage absolutely will be built on manipulation. And anyhow, Christ here responds here to this a question of divorce. He answered it clearly and without question. He said, "What therefore God hath put together, let not man put asunder." And he even continues on. He gets even more specific if we would have read on there. I might do that later in this sermon. But anyhow, we live in a culture where divorce is really, it's expected. You know, we have prenuptial agreements today. Everybody prepares for the marriage to fail. And matter of fact, I was at the barber this week, and the barber's girlfriend was there, and how he introduces her was like this, and I'm not kidding. I mean, he was kind of being sarcastic a little bit. He said, "Meet my future ex-wife." And really, he's just probably being more honest than most of those in society. I mean, it's amazing how we plan for the failure. But we see it's common practice today from with no commitment. Not only is divorce relevant to that, but so is this shacking up. Couples just shacking up together. That's a lack of commitment. It's a culture that thinks once the spark is over, you find someone new. You find someone new. It's self-centered, driven culture, and of course that's always going to be a recipe for disaster. Divorce no longer has a stigma of something evil and wicked, as something God hates, as it says in Malachi. The casual approach to divorce has even entered into churches. It seems the only thing that we're committed to is going to be our own self and our own self-interest. Today's thinking on marriage, you know, if you're not making me happy, then I'll find someone who will. As if it's your spouse's responsibility for your happiness. That's a dangerous mindset. Or you hear things like, we're just not compatible anymore. My happiness is what's most important to me. And really, what should be most important to the Christian is not our own happiness. Amen. It's to glorify God. That's what's most important. Anyhow, when these philosophies begin to become a part of our view of marriage, because it's so prevalent in our culture, the joy will be taken away. Why? Because the joy is centered on you and your interest within that marriage. Instead of the institution of marriage as God gave it, and of course the ultimate purpose of it being to glorify God. You're looking for joy. In other words, you are now looking for joy based on someone meeting your needs instead of you meeting someone's needs. You've now taken the ability for you to have joy and happiness and have removed it and given that power over to somebody else. who also happens to be a sinful creature. I mean, think about it at Christmas time. We have Christmas right around the corner here. What is more exciting? Getting to open the presents or watching your wife or husband or children open theirs? Watching. Absolutely. It's not even close. It's not even close. Because usually for each of them, I'll get something special, like for Marianne at Christmas and the kids. And I'll just rip them through. I don't even know what I'm getting. I'm just watching. All right, did she open it yet? Is it open yet? And that's more exciting. You see, it's almost like you almost got to make that to have that every day in your marriage. To have that mindset every day in your marriage where you're looking to do something for your spouse. And again, I believe this attitude should be present in all aspects of, you're not doing something from a self-interest, but purposely doing something simply for the other person, your spouse. And again, please don't mask this. You can become a master at times, you know, when I've sat down and have talked with people and over things, there's been situations where the other one really believes that everything that they do is for the other person. Yet the reality is, as you're digging through what's taking place, that person is doing a lot for the other person at times, but it's all self-motivated. There's a whole nother reason behind all of it than actually that person's needs. So don't mask this with self-interest. It's defeating the purpose. So I do believe this attitude should be present in our marriage if our marriage is going to last. I believe it should be present in communication, to the social aspect of our marriage, to the sexual side of the marriage. And again, if this is going to happen, it takes commitment to the marriage. You're not going to get to this level in your marriage without commitment to it. It has to be committed to. It takes work. You know, the conference like this, again, we hope to have these every year. You know, next year, hopefully in November time frame, although we should pray maybe they shut it down again so we can get the free breakfast out of this again. But next November, we'll have another one of these things again. What I'm trying to do, let's use a sports analogy here. I'm trying to give you the game plan. All right? I'm trying to give you the game plan of how this thing works, of how to have your marriage succeed. And so only thing I can do is give you the game plan. That's all I can do. That's it. But I'm telling you, this game plan in here is really good. It works. Here's our problem, though. You're going to go home, you're going to be excited, you're going to implement the game plan. But just like a really bad coach in college or the NFL, all of a sudden a crisis comes up, and you divert from the game plan. You think, wait, the lead has changed now. The lead has changed. I got to change up. Stay with the game plan. Stay with it. It'll rebound. All right? Don't change the game plan, you know, in the middle of the second quarter here. Stay with it. A game plan must be executed, and you're going to need commitment to it if that's going to take place. Again, I'll just go on. I was reading the story of this guy. I thought his commitment level was great. They had been married for 20 years exactly, and they got into a horrible fight. And the fight was the worst they had in their marriage. And the fight was so bad, he said he went up to the room. They're in different rooms right now. He goes upstairs, and she is packing her bag. And he says, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm leaving. I'm done." And he didn't say anything. He went and got a suitcase, threw it on the bed next to her, pack. And she's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going with you." That marriage made it. It had commitment. He was committed to it. Now, he does live in the backyard, but the marriage is still there. All right. So what I want to try and do right now is try and give some helps for commitment. All right. How we can help, because again, we need a paradigm shift in our thinking within the culture that we live in. Again, that's why churches are struggling from different standards, from music. We have entered a post-Christian culture period in America. That's where we're at. There was a time frame in America when it was easier to show commitment to your spouse because divorce was not accepted. That was part of the culture. That's changed. And so we grow up still in this culture. So within our mind, within us, it's all around us. We see it. We look at it as an answer. And so we got to have a paradigm shift in thinking. So I want to try and give some help to try and change our thinking a little bit when it comes to commitment. When Julius Caesar attacked Great Britain, all those islands over there, he did something fairly unique. Again, this was especially for that time frame. This was a good bit of traveling for them to have a battle take place. And so if you're familiar with some of the shores of England, there's a lot of cliff sides. So the army gets up on the side of the cliff, and he orders them to go back to the cliff and look back at the boats. He had the boats set on fire. They were burning. He wanted them committed to what they were getting ready to do. He didn't want them to think that retreat was an option. You had others in history who followed his example. Cortez followed his example when they got into Mexico. And his was a little bit different. When Caesar had the army head over, he had that done right away. Cortez got the idea that they wanted to quit and head out, so he just went ahead and had the boats burned. Again, it shows a certain level of commitment. And we certainly need that. We don't need to make provisions in our marriage for retreat. Because when the going gets tough, that's what you're looking for. The retreat. All right, some helps for this. One, I think you need to follow the right examples. You look at the examples of those who have the commitment and follow their example. All right, that certainly helps. When I grew up, I did not have, obviously my parents had divorced when I was very young. Almost everybody in my family was divorced for that matter, except for an uncle and an aunt. And even as a young boy, I still remember going there, and that became my example. I mean, it's amazing how the Lord was using it, even when I was lost, knowing what was coming. I mean, He's sovereign, and wanting me to see the example that was in that marriage, that was committed. Look to those ones who are committed. I've known since I've been here, those who are looking reasons to divorce, and so you know what they did? They went to divorced couples. They didn't go to the ones who made it through the difficult times and the trying times. And of course, those things have ended disastrously. Again, the person they should, you look for those who are committed to it, who are going to make it. You follow that example. I remember we were first married before we even have kids. We had a friend of ours, and anyhow, I don't know all that was going on within the marriage. But all of a sudden, he decided that he needed to follow a pastor who thought there was absolutely nothing wrong with divorce. Nothing wrong with it. Of course, that already let us know what he's already planning. He's already allowing for. Listen, follow those with the right example. What God hath put together, let no man put asunder. It can't get any clearer. It can't. And of course, the right theology of marriage helps. We've already talked about this in session number 1. But as well as Christ's words concerning divorce from Mark chapter 2 all the way down, really going down into verse 10, 11, and 12. He's strong on it. He's clear. He's not being vague about how it works. And sometimes this is a difficult issue to approach in a church because we live in a sin-cursed earth. We have couples that are right here in this room that have been divorced and remarried. Listen, understand this. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to save the marriages, that have not been divorced. That's what I'm attempting to do. Again, so I think you look at Christ's teaching on it. I think that's very important. I think it also helps when you begin to see who will get hurt by it. I think me and Mary Ann, this was also a really good lesson for me. We didn't have any kids yet. I was a bus captain and running a bus at our church. And I got a call at work from our church that it said, one of your bus kids needs you at their house. And I was really confused. That had never happened before. And so I asked if I could leave, you could go. And so I head over to his house. And as I pull in, his mom was throwing a chair out the window. Chair came out the back window. He was sitting on his front porch steps, just sitting there, the boy. And this boy, his dad was military, and he was in Alaska, actually, on a remote assignment in Alaska. And this boy had always talked how great his dad was. I mean, there was not another boy on my bus that talked. I never met his dad. His dad was in Alaska this entire time. I'd never met him. And he'd always talked how great his dad was. He had a new story about Dad every single week. And he clearly had the greatest dad on the bus. Well, on this day, Dad had called Mom and said he had found somebody else and that he would not be coming home. And to see that boy sitting there, he was crushed. I mean, his eyes were just dead. It wasn't that he was sitting there weeping. He was just crushed. Crushed. I can remember being 6 years old and moving into a new apartment and wondering where Dad is. Why isn't he here? So again, I think the right theology, the right approach, Christ knew what he was talking about when he said, what God hath put together, let not man put asunder. It's too easy today. Just go find somebody else. They'll make you happy. That is so wrong. That is so wrong. Another thing that'll help in commitment, and don't take this one lightly. I'm going to try and develop this one a little bit here. Have family devotions. I'm going to give you some stats. In the 1870s, the divorce rate in the United States of America was 1 in 34. 1 in 34. That statistic was taken in the 1870s. 1900s, they took another one. That had really taken a significant drop by the 1900s. And American culture was changing by 1900. If you study your own history, even spiritually speaking, there was a modernism coming into churches. And anyhow, by 1900, that dropped to 1 in 5. So in 30 years, we went from 1 in 34 to 1 in 5. Of course, today we realize, they say it's about somewhere around 40 to 45% again, but that is greatly skewed because of all those who simply shack up nowadays without any type of commitment. And so my guess is in reality, we're really probably still around the 50% mark. In reality, probably right around 1 in 2 marriages will end in divorce. But this is true today. Listen to these stats. 1 out of 105 marriages, this is true today, end in divorce if the couple attends church regularly. 1 in 105. Get this one. 1 in 1,105 marriages end in divorce if the couple attends church and has family devotions. That is staggering to think about. 1 in 1,105. There's something to this. There's something to it. Again, I believe a commitment to the Lord equals a commitment to your marriage, of course. And what I think family devotions does is I believe it curbs bad behavior between the husband and the wife. You know, there's when you know, like when the husband knows that he's going to have to sit down, and the wife for that matter, going to sit down and present the Bible to the children or to each other. There's a measure of responsibility with that, and it can curb bad behavior. Let me give you the next one with it and try and tie it together, explain what I mean by that. And not only, I believe you should pray with your spouse. I believe that'll help with the commitment. I believe you pray with your spouse. And I was dealing with a couple of these other day. I said, what I would like you to start doing, I want you to take the next 7 days, and I want you to pray together. I said, before you go to bed, I just want you to go over and pray with her. For the next 7 days, I'm going to go and take time and pray. And I said, the reason why I'm doing this isn't just for that prayer time. I said, I believe it's going to curb your behavior all day. Because when you know that you have to go get her and pray with her, it really changes your approach, because the goal is trying to get it more God-centered. Getting again, all the focus off of individual needs and individual hurts and focus on the other person, and you find how healing and how great that can actually be. And to where when you know you have to do that, it'll help curb bad behavior. I mean, it's awfully hard to pray before your family, husbands, when you've been acting like a jerk all day. You understand? You know, you've been flying off the handle, just being an idiot all day, yet you know you got to have devotions and pray. It curbs that. It helps keep you in check. So again, another thing that helps with it is pray with your spouse. And here's another big one. Don't stay committed to your marriage for the wrong reason, like children. Don't worry, I think children, that's a devastating consequence to them, as I've already talked about. But what are you going to do when the children are gone? What are you going to do then? And again, there's a lot of marriages just sort of almost waiting for that time. You stay committed to the marriage because of the Lord, because of Him. Now, with commitment involves some plowing. It takes some work. It takes some work. It certainly involves a measure of work if the marriage is going to be a success and it's going to have enjoyment with it. There are times that it says in Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 4, you have to plow when it's cold outside. There's times you got to plow when it's cold outside. There's times when it's just, it's just not the perfect weather for the work. When you don't want to do it. And those are the most important times to plow. Those are the most important times to work at it. Your marriage is not going to bear fruit if you're not plowing. If you're not working, doing little things like that. Praying with your spouse. Putting the other spouse's needs first. Demonstrating love. It's plowing. It takes work. Because the bummer about all this is our flesh is never going to disappear in all this. It's not. And that's where we get the power from our yieldingness to God. And as we yield to God, it doesn't make as if your flesh is gone. It's still there. As the Apostle Paul, who wrote Romans chapter 7, later says on in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the key to it was this: I die daily. I had to die to self. And that's so true in your marriage. When plowing, Job 4:8 example of this, you plant the right seed when you're plowing, by the way, in your marriage. You're sort of always working at your marriage. All right? Whether it's to a destructive end or whether it's to a stable end or a fruitful end. And you will reap what you sow in your marriage. You're going to reap what you sow in your marriage. So plow things like kindness and forgiveness, Christian conduct, respect, and honor. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 10. I want you to see this. Oh, by the way, I forgot to bring that up. I did have a couple things to announce. If you notice, the Brinkerhoffs are not here. He called last night, and he's been having trouble with his retina, actually for several years, but this last week it was getting worse, and then last night it really started acting up. So they left early this morning, and he's actually probably having a laser surgery done right now. His retina was starting to detach. And so they're correcting that probably even right now. So actually, as soon as I finish this, I need to get him on the prayer chain. So that's where the Brinkerhoffs are, though. So we do need to be remembering them. And there's something else I had to bring up, too. I'll remember it later. Anyhow, let me get to 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 10. Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in, what's that next word? Hope. And that he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. Boy, this is important. If there's one thing, especially when, as a pastor, and you're trying to help couples, and you're trying to basically get them to plow. But this is such a key to making it work. And that is the hope that it's going to work. The hope that it's going to work. If of course, the Lord's responsibility, not mine, but using mine, I'm usually doing the speaking at that point in time, to try and be able to get a couple to the point of, this will work. So there's hope there. Remember, I preached a message not too long ago on the power of hope. That's what it's dealing with right here. So that when you're working at this, you have the mindset, listen, this is going to work. This is going to bear fruit. That's important. The mindset and how you approach the work at the marriage. Listen, I will already know those who come in and say, if they're convinced, I've had it, where they're convinced, listen, this just isn't going to work. They're going to be fulfilling their own prophecy. They're preparing for failure. They're not preparing for success. I believe the hope is a key part when you're plowing, to believe that it's going to work. Remember this, though. You don't reap in the same season that you plow. So when you come back 2 weeks later and say, nothing's happening, I understand. We might be trying to undo 20 years of bad conduct. It's going to take more than 2 weeks. You reap in a different season than when you plant. So it'll take some time. Be patient. Stay hopeful. See, you can remain hopeful because of this. Not because of your spouse. It's amazing. That's the response. You don't understand my wife. You don't understand my husband. I'm going to be honest. I don't have to. I have to understand the God who created that person. I have to believe in the God who can actually change hearts. I have to believe in the God who can give the grace and strength that's needed. My hope has to lie in that, not in your ability to fix things or my ability to fix things, but in the God who is there. So please plow in hope, not in despair. Not in despair. Another thing to do is, along the lines of commitment, Luke chapter 9, verse 62, a popular verse right there. I got to read it now, I can't quote it. And Jesus saith unto him, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. So the plowing itself takes commitment, that you're going to work at this. You determine you're going to work at this commitment. And notice, it's not that the man returned here. All right? We don't have that much information that he returned. The idea is this, is that when he was plowing and looking back, he was plowing with reluctance, refusing to break from the past. You can't do that. That's even where the hope comes into play. It's saying, no, listen, we're going forward. We're going forward with this. This is going to work. We're going to make this work. Let's press on. And so you plow with commitment. Don't go into the plowing with reluctance. Don't look for a reason why it won't work. Focus on why it will work. The things that we are willing to work at and put the most effort into provide the most joy when we reap from them. The things that we don't have to work at too much, they might provide us a little bit of joy, but not too much. But when you really work at something, it provides the most joy. Daniel growing up was always putting together different things when he was really little with Legos, and then he advanced and different things like that. And then one year we got him this giant, I couldn't believe, I didn't realize how big it was. I felt so bad for my mom. I had bought it online and had it sent to her house to mail to us in New Guinea. The box was enormous. I think she paid like $300 some to get this thing to us. And I just felt horrible. I mean, the thing was worth maybe $100. And it was this huge box, and it was a really big roller coaster that you had to build. It took the boy just months and months of working on this thing. He couldn't do it in his room, it was too big. He had to do it on our front deck, is where he had to build this thing. And it had an overhang and stuff like that. And just about every day, Daniel would go out and he'd work on that thing and just put it together. It was bigger than him, it was taller than he was with a big loop, and just working on it. Then, and something of that size, there were so many frustrations he'd have. He'd try to start it, it just wasn't working right, and it wasn't lining up right. Now, am I missing pieces? And going through all of that. But then the day came when he turned it on, and it worked. Man, that car was running through there. That boy was so excited. It worked. Why was he so excited? Because of all the work he put into it. And as you put the work into your marriage and you begin to reap from that, boy, there's a joy there. There's a joy there. But the reality is, again, if you're going to work at this, you have to be committed. You can't have provision for a way out. You have to be committed. Again, as I close, I think of two examples. I like Joshua's example. Joshua 24:15, of course, the popular verse there. And, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You see his commitment to it. That's where he was. Same place we need to be. And I really do think that if we had the same thinking that Adam had, there's only one Eve. There's only one Adam. That's all there is. That's it. If we had more of that mindset today, our divorce rate would be much less than 1 in 2 or 1 in 1,000 even. If you really thought this is it. And apart from this, that it is sin before God. It would have that level of commitment to it. So again, if our marriages are going to work and have the joy, there has to be a level of commitment to it. Why? Because a marriage takes work. It does. It takes work. I assure you that there's times that even Pastor and Betty have got into a few little fights now and then. And I don't know who the preacher was. They got in a car with John R. Rice, who wrote the book on family and everything and how to have the perfect marriage and all that stuff. Well, they were fighting. And they were fighting really, really good. I mean, it was like bad testimony type fighting in the car. And this is John R. Rice here. He was human. People just read on the book or maybe read a sermon and they don't realize, it's still two humans. And for that marriage to work, it still took commitment. Because it's two sinful people living in a sin-cursed earth trying to figure this thing out. And yet the playbook's right here. It's right here. It takes commitment. Let's go ahead and pray.